A millionaire has lived in isolation since the tragic loss of his son, carrying a pain that even time has not been able to silence. On the boy's birthday, an unknown child appears at the cemetery wearing the same shirt the boy was buried in. She says that the boy in the photo handed her the item the day before and mentions secrets that no one else knew. Upon hearing the revelation, the man falls to his knees, and what he discovers next is unbelievable. Before listening to this incredible story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more exciting tales. Marco Lehman had everything money could buy. At 35, he led one of the most promising technology companies in the country, with a fortune that would impress even the most experienced investors in the capital. His penthouse apartment, located in the most exclusive neighborhood, had views of the sea and the park he frequented so often on weekends with his young son, Theo, his only child. Marco's life was meticulously organized. He would wake up at 5:30 a.m., go for his morning run, have breakfast with Helena, his wife, and Theo. Then he would go to the office where he spent hours creating, planning, building the future. At night, he would return home in time to put little Theo to bed. This was his sacred routine. This was his perfect life. Until that rainy Thursday. It was Theo's birthday, 6 years old. Marco had arranged to leave work early to pick up the cake, but a last-minute meeting delayed him. Driving down the main avenue, he called Helena. "I'm on my way. I'll be home in 20 minutes, he said, watching the rain begin to fall more heavily. "Theo is anxious," Helena replied. "He hasn't stopped asking when you're arriving. Aaron and Rose are already here with the children." Aaron had been his best friend since college, and Rose, his wife, had introduced Helena to Marco. The two couples were inseparable, and their children grew up like cousins. "Tell him that Marco's words were cut off by a deafening crash. A truck had lost control on the wet road, crossing the median and hitting several vehicles, including Marco's. His world spun 360 degrees, glass shattered, metal twisted. When he woke up 3 days later in a hospital room, Helena was by his side, her eyes swollen, her expression blank. Marco knew from the devastating silence that something terrible had happened. Theo was in the back seat of Aaron's car when a drunk driver ran a red light and hit them head-on. Little Theo fell into a coma. The days that followed were a blur of hospital corridors, conversations with doctors, hopes that dwindled with each new test. Marco blamed himself. If he had arrived earlier, if he hadn't stayed at the meeting, if he had picked Theo up from school as he had promised, the possibilities of a different fate tormented him. After 2 months of struggle, the doctors were clear. Theo was in a persistent vegetative state, with no significant brain response. The machine kept his heart beating, but his son, that boy with curious eyes who asked about the stars, was no longer there. The decision to turn off the machines was the hardest one Marco and Helena had ever made. Together, holding hands, they said goodbye to their son in a hospital room too silent to contain so much pain. The following months were hazy. Marco distanced himself from the company, delegating responsibilities to partners and directors. Helena tried to return to work as an interior designer, but each house she decorated reminded her of the plans she had for Theo's room when he grew up. They were two people sharing the same space, but they no longer shared their lives. Pain had created a chasm between them, filled only with painful silences and hurtful memories. A year after the accident, Helena packed her bags. "I can't take it anymore, Marco," she said, sitting on the edge of the bed they once shared intimately. "I'm breathing in his absence every day, in this house, in this life, and you're not even really here." "I'm here," he replied, his voice hoarse from someone who rarely used it. "Your body is here, but you disappeared along with it, and I need to find a way to go on." Marco didn't argue. There were no arguments against the truth. He had become an empty shell, a shadow of the man he once was. Helena deserved more than that, more than he could offer at that moment. "Where are you going?" she asked, when she was already at the door, with 2 suitcases and a box of souvenirs. "To my sister's house on the coast. I'm going to try to start over." He nodded. Starting over was something he didn't know if he would ever be able to do. After Helena left, Marco sank even further into isolation. The mansion, once vibrant with the sound of Theo's laughter echoing through the corridors, now seemed like a mausoleum. Each room held memories too painful to bear. She sold the house and bought a smaller, more functional apartment, with no room for the past. She donated most of Theo's toys, keeping only his favorite toy car and the teddy bear he never left behind at bedtime. Work became his only connection to the world. Marco returned to the company gradually, first part-time, then diving in head first. Meetings, travel, expansion into international markets, anything that could occupy his mind and exhaust his body enough to sleep without dreaming. For months, Aaron and Rose tried to stay in touch. They called, invited each other to dinners, showed up unannounced. But Marco had built a wall around himself, impenetrable and cold. Aaron, persistent, still tried from time to time. He sent messages, asked how he was doing, reminded him that he wasn't alone. "We'll be here when you're ready," read the last message, sent 6 months ago and never answered. Marco now lived a rigid routine, designed to avoid anything that might trigger memories, waking up, working, going home, sleeping, repeating. He avoided parks, schools, toy stores, children's birthday parties, and even the simple act of looking out the window when he heard children's laughter in the street. But as Theo's 8th birthday approached, something began to change. First, there was that song, the song that always played when I put Theo to sleep, inexplicably coming through the car radio, on a station he didn't even usually listen to. Then it was the storybook she found in the office drawer, the same one she read to Theo every night, and which she was sure she had donated along with the other things. The pages were marked exactly on the boy's favorite story, about a little bear who got lost in the forest and found his way back home by following the stars. And then, on the morning of what would have been Theo's 8th birthday, Marco found on the kitchen table the small red toy car he had kept inside a sealed box on top of the cupboard. The toy was positioned so that it pointed towards the door, as if inviting Marco to follow it. A shiver ran down his spine. He was alone in the apartment. There was no logical explanation for the stroller being there. Unless... No, he murmured to himself. That's absurd. But something inside him, a small part that still knew how to feel, was touched by an inexplicable hope. With trembling hands, Marco picked up the toy car. He felt the familiar weight of the metal, ran his finger over the small scratch on the left side, the result of the time Theo threw it away, frustrated at not being able to get the racetrack to work. A memory so vivid he could almost hear the boy crying, followed by his own voice, calm and patient, teaching him to try again. Marco closed his eyes tightly, trying to hold back the tears that were already beginning to form. It was the first time in almost 2 years that he had allowed emotion to overwhelm him. That little red car had awakened something he had been trying to bury, not just the pain, but also the love, the immense and unconditional love he felt for Theo. At that moment, Marco made a decision. He would visit the place where Theo rested, something he hadn't done since the day of the farewell ceremony. He needed to talk to his son, even if his words were carried away only by the wind. The cemetery was quiet that autumn morning. Marco walked slowly down the tree-lined avenue until he reached the small family grave. Theo's photo smiled from the tombstone, his eyes bright and lively, frozen in that moment forever. Marco knelt down, placed the flowers he had brought, and remained silent. The words he had rehearsed in the car now seemed inadequate. What could he say to a son who had left so soon? How could he express the emptiness, the guilt, the longing that consumed him every day? "I'm sorry," was all she could manage to say, her voice choked with emotion. "I'm sorry I wasn't there when you needed me." That's when he noticed. The photo on the tombstone was crooked, and there were wilted flowers scattered beside it, a careless detail that deeply angered him. His son deserved more respect than that. As he tried to fix the picture frame, he realized it was broken. Anger grew within him, a familiar feeling amidst the emotional numbness of the last few years. When a caretaker passed by, Marco approached him, raising his voice. "This is absurd. How can they leave a grave in this state? Is this how they respect people's memory?" The man, visibly embarrassed, tried to explain something about the strong winds the previous night, but Marco wasn't listening. Years of repressed emotions were now overflowing in the form of indignation that masked his true pain. "I want to speak to the person in charge of this cemetery. This is unacceptable." That's when he felt it. A small hand, touching his arm. Marco turned around, still consumed by anger, and found himself face to face with a boy. He must have been around 5 years old, with messy brown hair and curious eyes. But what made Marco's heart stop for a moment was the shirt the boy was wearing, striped blue and white, identical to the one Theo wore on the day he was buried. "Are you angry with the young man?" asked the boy, tilting his head slightly. Marco was speechless for a moment. That gesture, that tilt of his head, was exactly how Theo acted when he was confused about something. Yes, I am," he finally replied, the anger dissipating, replaced by a strange feeling of déjà vu. "The boy in the photo doesn't like it when people get angry," the child said, pointing to the gravestone. "He told me that yesterday." The world stopped. Marco felt as if the ground had disappeared beneath his feet. "What did you say?" she asked, almost breathless. The boy smiled, a smile that was all too familiar. "The boy in the photo. We talked yesterday. He asked me to wear this shirt today when I come to meet you." Marco felt his legs weaken. He leaned against the gravestone to avoid falling while trying to process what he had just heard. The boy's words echoed in his mind like waves crashing against rocks. How do you know the boy in the photo?" she asked, her voice trembling, a mixture of disbelief and hope welling up in her chest. "He appeared in my dream," the boy replied simply. "He said he was your son and that you were very sad. He asked me to tell you that you don't need to be sad anymore." Marco looked around, searching for someone who could be behind this absurd situation. Could it be a cruel joke? Who would have the nerve to use his son's memory in that way? "Where are your parents?" she asked, trying to remain calm. "My mother is over there." The boy pointed to a woman arranging flowers at a nearby grave. "She doesn't know I came to talk to you. The boy in the photo said it was a secret." The woman, as if sensing Marco's gaze, turned around. Seeing her son talking to a stranger, she hurried toward them, her face etched with worry. "Luca, what did I say about talking to strangers?" she scolded, pulling the boy close to her. Then, turning to Marco, "I'm sorry. I hope he didn't bother you." "No, he didn't bother me," Marco replied, still stunned. "Your shirt, where did you get it?" The woman seemed confused by the question. She looked at her son's shirt and then at Marco. "It was a donation. We received some clothes from the neighborhood church a few weeks ago." She hesitated, noticing the paleness in the man's face. "Are you all right, sir?" "Mom, that's the boy's father in the picture," Luca interrupted, pointing to the gravestone. "Just like I dreamed." The woman's expression changed. Her gaze shifted between her son, Marco, and Theo's photo on the gravestone. She seemed to understand something beyond words. "Luca has these dreams sometimes," she explained, her voice soft. "Dreams too vivid for a child. The doctors say it's just a fertile imagination, but—" She left the sentence hanging, as if she didn't know how to continue. "The boy in the photo. Did he say anything else?" Marco asked, unable to contain the question, even knowing how irrational it sounded. Luca nodded enthusiastically. "He said that you two used to go to the Star Park together, and that you always promised to take him to see the constellations for real one day, when he grew up." Marco felt as if he'd been punched in the stomach. The Park of Stars was what Theo called the small planetarium in town where they went on Sundays. It was a secret between them, something not even Helena knew for sure, and the promise to see the constellations had been made the night before the accident, when Theo, already in bed, pointed to the astronomy book and asked if one day they could see the stars for real, not just in the book or at the planetarium. "I think we need to go, Luca," the woman said, clearly uncomfortable with the situation. "Sorry again, sir." "Marco," he introduced himself automatically. "Marco Lehman." "Anna," she replied. "And this is Luca." "Marco, the boy in the photo said that's his name too," exclaimed Luca, pointing to the gravestone. "His name was Theo," Marco corrected, feeling a lump in his throat as he pronounced his son's name aloud for the first time in so long. "No, not his name, his father's name," Luca insisted. "Yours." Anna gently pulled her son along. "Come on, Luca. We've bothered Mr. Limon enough already." Before Marco could say anything, the two were already walking away along the stone path of the cemetery. He watched Luca's small figure, wearing Theo's shirt, until they disappeared through the main gate. His heart was pounding erratically. There was no rational explanation for what had just happened. How could that boy know about the Park of Stars, about the promise made the night before the accident? And the shirt, the same shirt Theo wore on the day of the funeral, the same one. Marco had personally chosen because it was his son's favorite. His head spinning with questions, Marco returned to his car. He needed answers, and there was only one person who could help him find them. Aaron opened the front door, visibly surprised. It had been almost 2 years since he had seen Marco in person, despite numerous attempts to contact him. "Marco? What happened?" he asked, astonishment evident in his voice. "I need to talk to you," Marco replied, the urgency clear in his voice. "It's about Theo's things. What happened to them?" Aaron hesitated, glancing inside the house, before turning his attention back to his friend. "Come in. Rose just left with the children, but she should be back soon." Aaron and Rose's house was welcoming, filled with family photos and scattered toys, signs of an active family life. Marco felt a pang in his chest when he saw an old photo above the fireplace. Him and Aaron at their college graduation, alongside Helena and Rose, all smiling, full of plans for the future. "Coffee?" Aaron offered, leading Marco to the kitchen. "No, thank you, I just need to know about Theo's things," Aaron sighed, sitting down at the kitchen table and indicating a chair for Marco. "Most of it was donated, as you requested. Helena set aside some souvenirs for herself. The rest went to the Santo Antonio Church, the one near your old office." "The clothes, too?" Marco asked, leaning forward, the tension evident in every muscle of his body. "Yes, the clothes, toys, books, everything you and Helena decided not to keep." Aaron paused, studying his friend's face. Why this question now? After all this time? Marco hesitated. How could he explain what had just happened? How could he put into words something he himself didn't understand? "I met a boy today," he began, choosing his words carefully, "in the cemetery. He was wearing one of Theo's shirts, the same one that—" He swallowed hard, unable to finish the sentence. Aaron nodded, understanding without needing any more words. "But that wasn't all," Marco continued. "He knew things, Aaron. Things about Theo, about me, about our conversations. Things that nobody else could know." A heavy silence settled between the two men. Aaron seemed to be processing the information, trying to find a rational explanation. "Perhaps Helena mentioned something to someone," he suggested. "Or perhaps—" "He knew about the Star Park," Marco interrupted, "and about the promise of seeing the constellations for real. Not even Helena knew about it." Aaron leaned back in his chair, running a hand over his face. "What do you think is going on, Marco?" Marco shook his head, lost. "I don't know, but I need to find that boy again, find out how he knows all these things." He paused. "I need to talk to Helena." Aaron stared at him, surprise etched on his face. "You haven't spoken to Helena in—" "I know," Marco interrupted him, "but I need it. Now, do you have her contact information?" "I do. Rose talks to her regularly." Aaron hesitated. "But Marco, maybe it's not a good idea. Helena has moved on. She's different." "Different how?" Aaron seemed uncomfortable. "She went back to work as a designer. She opened her own studio on the coast. She's been dating people, trying to rebuild her life." Marco felt a tightness in his chest. Helena was moving on, while he remained stuck in the same place, unable to take a step in any direction. But now, after the encounter with Luca, something had changed. A door that seemed permanently closed was opening, letting in a thin ray of light. "I need her contact information, Aaron, please." Aaron nodded, picked up his cell phone, and sent the number to Marco. "Just be kind, okay? She's been through a lot." Marco silently agreed. He knew better than anyone how much Helena had suffered, not only from the loss of Theo, but also from losing him, Marco, to the depression and isolation that followed. Leaving Aaron's house, Marco didn't go straight to his apartment. He drove to St. Anthony's Church, determined to find out more about Theo's donations. It was a small clue, but it was all he had at the moment. The church was almost empty at that time of day. Only a few elderly ladies were praying silently in the front pews. Marco approached the altar, looking for a church worker or the parish priest. An elderly lady, arranging flowers on the altar, noticed his presence. "Can I help you, my son?" she asked with a gentle smile. "I hope so. I'm looking for the person responsible for the donations received by the church." "Ah, that would be Father Philip. He's in the sacristy. Come, I'll take you there." Marco followed the woman down a side corridor to a small room at the back of the church. There, a middle-aged man wearing a simple cassock was arranging some books on a shelf. "Father, this young man would like to talk about donations," the woman announced, before discreetly withdrawing. Father Philip turned around, adjusting his reading glasses. "How can I help you?" "My name is Marco Lehman. About 2 years ago, some of my son's clothes and toys were donated to this church. I need to know where they went." The priest seemed to reflect for a moment. "Lyman, yes, I remember. It was a considerable donation." He walked over to a file and began searching through a folder. "Here it is. Most of the items were distributed among needy families in the parish. Some toys went to the community daycare center in the neighboring district. And the clothes, specifically a blue and white striped shirt." The priest frowned, examining the list. "We don't have a specific record of each item, Mr. Lyman. Only of the entire donation." He looked at Marco over his glasses. "Is there a problem? May I ask why you're looking for that particular shirt?" Marco hesitated. How could he explain it without sounding completely insane? "I saw a child wearing that shirt today. It was my son's favorite shirt. It has sentimental value." The priest nodded, understanding. "I understand. Well, as I said, we don't have a specific record of who received each item. But most of the children's clothing went to Lavanderia Estrella in the city center. The owner, Anna Müller, has a young son and also distributes clothes to other needy families in the community." Marco felt his heart race. Anna, the same name as the mother of the boy he met in the cemetery. "This Anna, does she have a son named Luca?" The priest seemed surprised by the question. "Yes, little Luca. A smart boy, but a little different." "How do you know that?" "I met them today by chance," Marco replied, trying to keep his voice steady. "Could you give me the address of that laundromat?" The priest hesitated, clearly weighing whether he should provide such information. "May I ask what your intentions are, Mr. Lyman? Anna is a single woman raising a young child. If there's a problem—" "There's absolutely no problem," Marco hastened to assure. "I just want to thank you for taking such good care of my son's things." The priest studied Marco's face for a moment, as if searching for signs that he was lying. Finally, he nodded. "Laundry Star is located at 37 Acacia Street, near the Central Square. But I ask that you be respectful. Anna has been through considerable hardship." "Thank you, Father. I will." As he left the church, Marco checked his watch. It was still early afternoon. The laundromat would probably be open. He could go there now, try to find Anna and Luca again, get more answers. But first there was something else I needed to do. He picked up his cell phone and, after a few seconds of hesitation, typed a message to the number Aaron had given him. "Helena, it's me. We need to talk. It's about Theo." Helena didn't reply to the message immediately. Marco stared at his phone screen for a few minutes, waiting for those double blue ticks that would indicate she had read his message. Nothing. Maybe she had changed her number. Maybe she was busy. Or maybe, after everything, she simply didn't want to talk to him anymore. And who could blame her? Sighing, Marco put his cell phone in his pocket and started the car. Laundromat Estrella would be his next destination. He needed to see Anna and Luca again. He needed to understand what was happening. Acacia Street was a narrow street in the old city center, full of small family businesses that bravely resisted the encroachment of large shopping malls. The laundromat wasn't hard to find. A modest facade with a faded blue sign that read Lavanderia Estrella, Star Laundromat, in white cursive letters, and below in smaller letters, since 1995. Marco parked across the street and watched the activity for a few minutes. Through the shop window, he could see Anna serving customers, collecting clothes, operating the machines. There was no sign of Luca. After gathering his courage, Marco crossed the street and entered the laundromat. A small bell on the door announced his arrival, causing Anna to look up from the sheets she was folding. The recognition was immediate. Her eyes widened slightly before assuming a cautious expression. "Mr. Lehman," she said, her voice controlled, "I didn't expect to see you here." "I apologize for showing up like this," Marco replied, feeling suddenly out of place. "Father, Felipe gave me your address." Anna nodded slowly without saying anything, just waiting for him to continue. I'd like to talk about today. About Luca," Marco explained, looking around. "Is he here?" "At school," Anna replied curtly. "He studies in the afternoon." An uncomfortable silence settled between them. Marco realized he hadn't planned what to say. How could he broach such a delicate subject without sounding like a complete lunatic? "Look, I know it must seem strange for me to show up like this," she began, choosing her words carefully. "But what happened today at the cemetery? What Luca said, Kim, I can't stop thinking about it." Anna sighed, looking at the clock on the wall. "I have 2 more clients to meet with today. After that, we can talk." Marco agreed, resigning himself to waiting. He sat in a small chair in the corner of the laundry room watching Anna work. There was something graceful in the way she moved, efficient and methodical, treating each piece of clothing with care, as if telling a story. About an hour later, she flipped the sign on the door to closed and motioned for Marco to follow her. They went up a narrow staircase at the back of the laundry room, which led to a small apartment upstairs. It was a modest but welcoming space. Toys were neatly arranged in a colorful chest, children's books were stacked on a low shelf, and photos of Luca at different ages decorated the walls. A home where love was palpable in every corner. "Would you like some coffee?" Anna offered, already heading towards the kitchen. "Yes, thank you." Marco sat down on the small sofa in the living room, noticing a picture frame on the coffee table. It was a photo of Luca, younger, perhaps 3 years old, smiling next to a young man. "Your husband?" she asked when Anna returned with 2 cups of coffee. She hesitated before answering. "Ex-husband. He left us when Luca was 4 years old. He said he couldn't cope with the way Luca is." "What's he like?" Marco asked, accepting the cup she offered him. Anna sat in the armchair opposite the sofa, studying Marco for a moment before answering. "Luca was always different. Ever since he was very little. He had vivid dreams, he said things he couldn't possibly know." She paused as if carefully choosing her next words. "When he was 3 years old, he woke up in the middle of the night crying, saying that his grandfather had left. My father was perfectly fine, living in another city, but the next morning we got the call. He had suffered a cardiac arrest during the night." Marco felt a shiver run down his spine. "And has this happened other times?" "Some. Not always such dramatic things. Sometimes he simply knows things he shouldn't know, like today, at the cemetery." She stared directly at Marco. How could he know those things about his son? "That's what I came to ask," Marco replied, placing the cup on the table. "The shirt he was wearing. Father Felipe said it might have come from donations I made to the church." "Yes, we received several children's clothes a few months ago. That shirt was a little big for Luca, but he insisted on wearing it today. He said he needed to wear it to meet the sad man in the cemetery." Anna paused, her eyes searching Marco's. "I'd never taken him to that cemetery before. I didn't even know he knew where it was. When I realized it, he had disappeared among other graves, and then I found him talking to you." Marco felt his heart race. It was all too surreal. "And what did he say next, when you left?" Anna sighed. "He said that the boy in the photo was happy because you had finally met. That now you could begin to remember how to smile. The words hit Marco like an icy wave. They were the same words he used to say to Theo when the boy was sad. Remember how to smile, champ. It's easy, look. And then he would make faces until his son burst into laughter. I don't know what's going on here, Anna continued, her gaze fixed on Marco. I don't know if my son has some kind of gift, or if it's just a strange coincidence, but I know he's not lying, and I know this means something important to you. Marco couldn't answer immediately. His mind was a jumble of thoughts and emotions. Part of him wanted to believe that, in some mysterious way, Theo was trying to communicate through Luca. Another, more rational part, said it was all just a series of bizarre coincidences. I don't know what to think, he finally admitted. I don't know what to believe. Believe in what brought comfort to your heart today, Anna replied softly. For the first time since I met you hours ago, I see a spark of life in your eyes. Regardless of what's happening, perhaps that's exactly what you needed. Before Marco could answer, the cell phone in his pocket vibrated. He picked it up, almost reflexively, and saw a message from Helena. Where are you? We need to talk in person. Marco looked from the message to Anna, undecided. Go, she said, as if she had read his thoughts. Luca only gets back from school at 5. If you want, you can come back after that. Thank you, Marco replied, standing up. I'll be back if it's not too much trouble. No, it's not, Anna assured him, walking him to the door. I think Luca will be happy to see you again. Once at the door, Marco hesitated. Anna, do you believe that those who have passed on can communicate with us in some way? She smiled, a slight, sad smile. I believe that love never completely disappears. It just changes form. Marco nodded, those words echoing in his mind as he descended the stairs and returned to his car. He typed a quick reply to Helena, arranging to meet her at a cafe downtown in half an hour. Café Viola was a small, cozy establishment known for its tranquil atmosphere and discretion. Marco arrived first and chose a table in the back, away from the windows. His heart was racing, a mixture of anxiety and anticipation taking over his body. When Helena entered, Marco hardly recognized her. Her hair, once long and brown, was now short, in a modern cut that framed her face. She was thinner, and there was a different aura around her, lighter perhaps, as if she had left behind a weight she had carried for years. She spotted him and walked toward him, her eyes fixed on his. Marco stood up automatically, a gesture of courtesy that seemed strange, considering the intimacy they had once shared. Helena, he said, his voice almost a whisper. Marco, she replied, sitting down opposite him. It's been a while. Yes. He sat down too, suddenly at a loss for words. The words he had rehearsed in the car seemed inadequate now. A waitress approached, momentarily breaking the awkward silence. A jasmine tea, please, Helena asked without looking at the menu. Black coffee, Marco added. When the waitress walked away, Helena turned her attention back to him. Your message surprised me. I thought we'd never talk about him again. Marco noticed how she avoided saying Theo's name, as if pronouncing it might evoke a pain she had worked hard to overcome. Something happened today, he began, choosing his words carefully. Something I can't explain. Helena watched him with a mixture of caution and curiosity. Her hands resting on the table were tense. I went to the cemetery, Marco continued. It would have been his birthday, 8 years old. Helena nodded slightly, a shadow of sadness passing through her eyes. I know. I was there yesterday. Marco didn't hide his surprise. Did you go? Every year, she replied simply. The day before the birthday, never on the actual day. It's easier that way. Marco felt a pang of guilt. Helena had never stopped visiting her son, while he, immersed in his own suffering, could barely pronounce Theo's name. I found a boy there, he said finally, getting straight to the point. A 5-year-old boy named Luca. He was wearing one of Theo's shirts, the same one he wore at the funeral, Helena finished, her voice trembling slightly. How is that possible? Marco told her about the clothing donation, about the Star Laundry, about Anna, but mostly he told her about the things Luca knew, The Park of Stars, the promise of the constellations, the exact words Marco used to say to make Theo smile. Helena listened to him in silence, her eyes never leaving his. When he finished, she remained quiet for a long moment, as if processing everything she had heard. "Do you think it's him?" he finally asked. "Do you think that somehow Theo is trying to communicate with us through this boy?" "I don't know what to think," Marco admitted. "Part of me wants to believe so. Another part says it's crazy, that I'm so desperate for a connection that I'm seeing patterns where there aren't any." Helena reached out, lightly touching Marco's hand. It was the first physical contact between them in almost 2 years. "I dreamt about him last night," she said, her voice almost a whisper. "I dreamt he was in a field running and laughing. He turned to me and said, 'Daddy will remember how to smile today, Mummy, you'll see.'" Marco felt his blood run cold. The same words Anna had said that Luca had mentioned. "Helena, this is scary, reassuring, a little of both." She withdrew her hand, a small smile on her lips. "I don't know what to think either, Marco. I only know that, for the first time in a long time, I feel he's at peace. And maybe that's what he wanted to tell us." The waitress returned with the orders, placing the cups on the table and discreetly withdrawing. "I want to meet this boy," said Helena, holding her teacup with both hands as if seeking warmth. "I want to see for myself." Marco nodded. "I arranged to go back to the laundromat today, after Luca gets home from school, around 5 o'clock. "I'll go with you," she decided, her eyes reflecting a determination that Marco had almost forgotten existed. They remained silent for a few minutes, each absorbed in their own thoughts, sipping their drinks. It was strange to be there, together again, united by the memory of their son and by something neither of them could explain. "How have you been, Helena?" Marco finally asked, breaking the silence. She shrugged, a slight gesture. "Surviving, learning to live again. I opened my design studio on the coast. I have some loyal clients, interesting projects." He paused. "And you?" "Working, a lot, that's all I do." Helena studied him for a moment, her eyes scanning his face as if searching for something. "You look tired, Marco. Not just physically. It's like your light has gone out." He didn't answer. There was no need. Helena had always been able to read his soul like an open book. "I'm so sorry I left like that," she continued, surprising him. "But I couldn't stay any longer. It was like living with a ghost." "I understand," Marco replied sincerely. "You did what you needed to do to survive. I would have done the same if I could." "But you couldn't," she finished, her voice soft, "because the ghost was inside you." Marco nodded, feeling a lump in his throat. "It still is." Helena reached out her hand again, this time holding his firmly. "Maybe it's time to let it go, Marco. Not Theo, not the memories, not the love, but the guilt, the weight, the idea that somehow you could have prevented what happened. If I had arrived earlier, then maybe you were in the car when the accident happened too," she interrupted him, her eyes glistening with restrained tears. "And I would have lost you both." Marco felt something break inside him, a barrier he had erected long ago, a wall that kept him separate from his feelings, from his humanity. "I don't know how to move on," she admitted, her voice breaking. "I don't know how to live without this pain." "One day at a time," Helena replied, squeezing her hand. "That's how we all do it. One day, then another, until one day you realize you smiled without feeling guilty about it." Marco allowed himself to truly look at Helena then. Not just see her, but look at her. He saw the strength she had found, the peace she had painstakingly achieved, and he felt for the first time in years a small ray of hope. "Let's meet Luca," he said finally. "Let's see what this boy has to tell us." Helena nodded, a small smile on her lips. "Yes, let's find out together." At 5 o'clock, Marco and Helena were in front of the Estrella laundry. The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky with orange hues that were reflected in the shop window. The sign still read closed, but Marco could see movement through the glass. "Are you sure you want to do this?" Helena asked, noticing how tightly she was gripping the strap of her bag. "I do," she replied, though her voice betrayed a slight tremor. "We need to know." Marco nodded and knocked lightly on the door. A few seconds later, Anna appeared, opening it just enough to see who it was. Her gaze shifted from Marco to Helena, a look of recognition crossing her face. "You came," he said simply, opening the door wider for them to enter. "Luca just got home from school. He's having lunch upstairs." They followed her to the upstairs apartment. Luca was sitting at the small kitchen table, eating a sandwich and drinking orange juice. When he saw them, his eyes lit up with a recognition that went beyond their chance encounter at the cemetery. "You came," she exclaimed, looking at Marco. Then her gaze turned to Helena, and an even wider smile spread across her face. "And you too, the boy in the photo will be so happy." Helena froze beside Marco, her hand instinctively reaching for his. Marco squeezed it gently, trying to convey a strength he didn't fully feel himself. "Luca," Anna interjected gently, "these are Mr. and Mrs. Lyman. They came to talk to you about the boy in the photo." "I know," Luca replied, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. "He told me they were coming." A heavy silence settled in the small kitchen. Anna gestured toward the living room, suggesting that perhaps it would be better if they talked there. "Luca, finish your snack and come to the living room, okay?" she asked. The boy nodded, turning his attention back to the sandwich, though his eyes kept darting curiously towards Marco and Helena. In the living room, Anna offered the sofa to the couple while she herself sat in the armchair. Marco noticed how Helena looked around, absorbing every detail of the modest apartment, as if searching for clues to something she herself couldn't define. "Thank you for receiving us like this," Marco began, breaking the awkward silence. "This is Helena, my ex-wife. She would also like to speak with Luca." Anna nodded, her gentle eyes landing on Helena. "I understand. This must be very difficult for both of you." "It's like being in a dream," Helena replied softly. "A very strange dream, from which I don't know if I want to wake up." Luca entered the room at that moment, wiping his mouth with the back of his hand. Anna gestured for him to come closer. "Luca, Mrs. Lyman would like to talk to you about the boy in the photo. Do you mind?" The boy shook his head, approaching Helena with surprising ease. He stopped before her, his curious eyes studying every detail of her face. "You're more beautiful than in the photos," he simply stated. Helena held her breath. "What photos, Luca?" "The ones the boy showed me, in my dream. He has many pictures of you. He said you always smile in them, even when you're sad inside." Helena brought her hand to her mouth, unable to contain her emotion. Marco felt his own heart clench in his chest. That observation was so characteristic of Theo, always sensitive to the feelings of others, especially his mother's. "What else did he show you?" Helena asked, her voice only a whisper. Luca seemed to reflect for a moment. "He showed me his room, with the stars on the ceiling that glow in the dark, and the big house, with the pool where the three of you used to swim together, and the shaggy dog that lived there before he was born." Marco and Helena exchanged a stunned look. Rex, the golden retriever they had owned for years, had died 6 months before Helena became pregnant. They had never shown Theo any pictures of him, never even mentioned that they had a dog before he was born. "Luca," Marco interjected, trying to keep his voice steady, "when you dream about the boy in the photo, what does he look like? What does he say?" The boy shrugged, with the uncomplicated simplicity of children. "He's cool, a little taller than me, he laughs a lot, and he knows a lot about stars and planets." She paused, as if trying to remember something important. "Oh, and he always asks if I can help his dad remember how to smile. It's very important to him." Helena let out a small sob, quickly muffled by her hand. Marco felt something warm trickle down his face, a tear, he realized, the first he had shed in years. "And what else does he say?" she asked, her voice breaking. Luca approached, placing a small hand on Marco's knee in a surprisingly adult gesture of comfort. "He says you don't need to feel guilty anymore, that it was just an accident, that you couldn't have known." Marco felt as if the ground had disappeared beneath his feet. Those words, the same ones he repeated to himself during sleepless nights, the same ones he desperately tried to believe. Helena reached out, gently touching Luca's shoulder. "And what about me? Does he have a message for me?" The boy smiled, a sweet and genuine smile. "He says he's happy you've gone back to designing houses, that he likes it when you sing while you work, even if you sing different songs now than before." Helena covered her face with her hands, unable to hold back the tears. Marco put his arm around her shoulders, pulling her closer, a gesture of comfort he had forgotten how to offer. Anna watched the scene with a mixture of compassion and discomfort, clearly torn between allowing this inexplicable connection to happen and protecting her son from all that emotional baggage. "Luca," she called softly, "why don't you go get that special toy you found with the shirt? Perhaps Mr. and Mrs. Lyman would like to see it." The boy nodded enthusiastically and ran to his room. Anna turned to the couple. "I'm so sorry. I know this must be overwhelming for you. If you want to stop—" "No," Marco and Helena answered in unison. "We need this," Helena added, wiping away her tears, "however difficult it may be." Luca returned a few moments later, carrying something in his small hands. It was a toy car, red with yellow details, a rare imported model that Marco had bought for Theo on a business trip abroad. "It's his favorite toy car," Luca said, handing the toy to Marco. "He said you can have it again if you want. He won't be mad." Marco picked up the stroller, feeling its familiar weight in his hands. He remembered when he had given it to Theo, the sparkle in the boy's eyes, the way he carried it everywhere for weeks. "It was very kind of you to keep it so safe," Marco managed to say, his voice trembling. Luca shook his head. "I didn't keep it. He came to visit me last night and left it here, along with his shirt. He said you were coming today." A stunned silence filled the room. Anna looked at her son with an expression difficult to decipher. Worry, confusion, perhaps even a little fear. "Luca, are you saying that the boy in the photo came here, physically?" she asked. "Not exactly," the boy replied, with a logic of his own that only made sense to him. "It was in my dream, but when I woke up the toy car was really here, along with the shirt." He frowned thoughtfully. "It's complicated to explain. It's like he sent it to me from somewhere else." Helena reached out, touching the stroller that Marco was still holding. "This toy car was in his room," she said softly, "on the highest shelf, along with other toys he no longer used, but didn't want to donate." Marco nodded, remembering the box he had stored high up in the cupboard, which contained Theo's most precious memories of favorite toys, drawings, little treasures collected during walks in the park. "How did this end up here?" he asked, more to himself than to the others. "I don't know," Anna replied honestly. "When I went to wake Luca for school this morning, he was already dressed in his striped shirt, and the stroller was next to him on the bed. I thought maybe it had come with the church donations, although I didn't remember seeing it before." "That doesn't make sense," Helena murmured. "That box was never donated. Marco kept it where? In his new apartment?" Marco shook his head. "No. It's in the company storage. I took it there myself after I sold the house. I couldn't look at those things every day, but I also couldn't get rid of them." "Have you checked the box recently?" Helena asked. "No. I haven't opened that box since I put it away there almost 2 years ago." A thoughtful silence filled the room. Each person tried in their own way to find a logical explanation for what was happening. "Perhaps we should check," Helena finally suggested. "See if the cart really disappeared from there." Marco nodded, though a part of him already knew the answer. Something was happening there that went beyond logic, beyond what his rational mind could explain. "We can go there now," he suggested. Helena agreed, standing up. They both looked at Anna and Luca, hesitant. "Can we come back later?" Marco asked. "To tell you what we found?" Anna seemed to weigh the situation for a moment before replying. "It's best not to today. Luca has school tomorrow and it's getting late." She paused, then added, "But you can come back tomorrow afternoon if you want. He gets out of school at 3 on Fridays." Helena crouched down until she was at Luca's height. "Would you mind if we came to visit you again tomorrow?" The boy smiled, a wide and genuine smile. Of course not. The boy in the photo said you would come many times. He's very happy that you're together again. Something about the way Luca said those words made Marco and Helena exchange an embarrassed glance. They hadn't told him they were separated, but somehow the boy knew. "Thank you, Luca," Helena replied softly. "You are a very special boy." They said goodbye to Anna and Luca, promising to return the next day. On the sidewalk in front of the laundromat, Marco and Helena stopped, gazing at each other in the orange light of the sunset. "Where are we going now?" Helena asked. "To the company warehouse?" Marco nodded. "Can you come with me? In my car? That way we don't have to be separated." Helena hesitated for a moment before agreeing. "That's fine, my car is parked nearby. We can come back and pick it up later." The drive to the company building was filled with a silence heavy with unspoken thoughts. Marco drove automatically, while Helena gazed out the window, lost in her own reflections. The little red car rested between them, on the car's center console, a small object that now carried the weight of an inexplicable mystery. Marco's company headquarters was an imposing glass and steel building in the capital's financial district. By that hour, most of the employees had already left, leaving only a few workaholics and the security team. "It's been a while since I've been here," Helena commented, as they crossed the lobby toward the elevators. "It seems bigger than I remembered." "We expanded to the top 2 floors last year," Marco replied. "New divisions, new projects." He nodded to the security guard, who greeted him respectfully. The man cast a curious glance at Helena, obviously recognizing her from the photos that once decorated Marco's office. In the elevator, Marco pressed the button for the basement. "The storage area is on the 2nd level below the parking lot," he explained. "That's where we keep old files, obsolete equipment, and other things." Helena nodded, understanding what was left unsaid. Other things, memories, the past, everything Marco couldn't face but also couldn't let go of. The warehouse was a large area divided into sections by metal grates. Marco used his access card to open one of the sections at the back of the room. Inside, there were several boxes of different sizes, all carefully labeled and organized. "It's over there," he said, pointing to a medium-sized box in the far corner. The label simply read, TL, Theo Limon. With trembling hands, Marco approached the box. It was exactly where he had left it, seemingly untouched. A thin layer of dust covered the lid, suggesting that no one had moved it in a long time. Hesitantly, he lifted the lid. Helena approached, her shoulder brushing against his as they both gazed at the contents of the box. Inside were Theo's childhood treasures, storybooks with marked pages, seashells collected on walks at the beach, a small photo album, a teddy bear battered by constant love, clothes that no longer fit but were too special to simply be donated. But the red stroller with yellow details wasn't there. "It's impossible," Marco murmured, carefully rummaging through the contents of the box. "I put it here, I'm absolutely sure." Helena placed her hand over his, stopping his frantic movements. "I believe you," she said softly. "But he's not here right now. He's with Luca." Marco looked at her, his eyes reflecting confusion and vulnerability. "What's happening, Helena? How is this possible?" She shook her head without answering. "I don't know. But maybe we don't need to know. Maybe we just need to accept it." "Accept what?" "That objects disappear from closed boxes and reappear in strangers' homes. That a boy we've never met knows intimate things about our son, about us." Marco's voice trembled, not with anger but with fear, fear of the unknown, of the inexplicable. "To accept that perhaps there is more between heaven and earth than our vain philosophy can explain," Helena replied, quoting Shakespeare. "To accept that perhaps in some way we don't understand, Theo is trying to tell us something." Marco closed his eyes, taking a deep breath. Part of him wanted to cling to logic, to deny everything he had witnessed. Another part, a part that had been silenced for too long, desperately longed to believe. "What if it's just a coincidence?" she asked, almost in a whisper. "What if we're seeing what we want to see because the pain of loss is unbearable?" "Then it will still have been worth it," Helena replied, her voice firm despite the tears glistening in her eyes. "Because for the first time in 2 years, Marco, you're really talking about him, about your feelings. He's alive again." Those words hit Marco like a wave, shattering the last defenses he had erected around his heart. There, surrounded by the tangible memories of his son, before the woman he had once loved more than anything, he finally allowed himself to break. Helena embraced him as he wept, her own body trembling with silent sobs. They remained like that for a long time, united by their shared grief, but also by something more, a faint ray of hope that was beginning to pierce the darkness in which they had lived for so long. When they finally parted ways, Marco wiped his face, feeling strangely light, as if a weight had been lifted from his shoulders. "What do we do now?" he asked, his voice hoarse. Helena took his hand, intertwining her fingers with his in an intimate gesture they hadn't shared in years. "We'll go back tomorrow. Talk to Luca again. Find out what else Theo wants to tell us." Marco nodded, gently squeezing her hand. "And then what?" A small smile formed on Helena's lips. A genuine smile, the first Marco had seen on her face since the accident. "Then perhaps we'll begin to remember how to smile again." That night, Marco drove Helena to the hotel where she was staying during her visit to the capital. The silence in the car was different now, no longer heavy with tension and unspoken words, but contemplative, almost comfortable. The red toy car rested on the center console between them, a tangible symbol of the mystery they were experiencing. "Would you like to grab a coffee or something?" Marco asked hesitantly as he parked in front of the hotel. Helena looked at the clock. It was past 9 o'clock at night. "Actually, I haven't had dinner yet," he replied. "There's a restaurant here at the hotel. If you'd like—" "I'd love to," Marco finished quickly, perhaps too quickly. He realized how eager he was to prolong the time with Helena, as if he feared that, once separated, all the connection they had rebuilt that day might dissipate like smoke. The hotel restaurant was elegant without being pretentious. Soft lighting, discreet background music, tables spaced far enough apart to ensure privacy. They were led to a table in the corner, near a window overlooking the illuminated inner garden. "It's strange," Helena commented after they placed their orders. "We're sitting here like strangers on a first date, but we've already shared a whole life." Marco smiled slightly. "Maybe it's a bit of both, strangers and close friends at the same time." "How have you really been, Marco?" she asked, her eyes searching his with genuine interest. "Besides work." He thought for a moment, considering giving the automatic answer he offered to everyone who asked that question. "I'm fine." But Helena deserved more than that. She always had. "Surviving," he answered honestly. "Existing, but not truly living. Each day is a repetition of the previous one. I work, I go home, I sleep, and I repeat everything the next day." He paused. "And you? Aaron mentioned that you opened a design studio on the coast." Helena nodded, a glint of enthusiasm appearing in her eyes. "Yes, a little over a year ago. I started with small projects, interior decorating for vacation homes. Now I'm working on some commercial projects as well, restaurants, small inns." "It's always been his dream," Marco observed, "to have his own studio." "Yes, it's one of the few things that gives me genuine joy right now." She hesitated before continuing. "And I've met people. I've made new friends." Marco understood the message between the lines. "Do you see anyone?" Helena lowered her eyes, fidgeting with the napkin on the table. "There were a few people. Nothing serious yet." She looked at him. "And you?" Marco shook his head. "No, I can't imagine being with someone else." A delicate silence hung between them, filled only by the soft clinking of cutlery and the muffled murmur of conversations at neighboring tables. "What happened to us, Helena?" Marco finally asked, his voice low. "We were so happy." She looked at him with eyes that had seen too much, that had cried more than they had. "Life happened, Marco. Tragedy happened, and we didn't know how to face it together." "I lost myself," he admitted. "After the accident, it was like a part of me went away with Theo. I couldn't feel anything but pain and guilt. I couldn't be the husband you needed." And I couldn't bear to see you fading away day after day, she replied. It was like living with a ghost, as if I had lost you both at the same time. I'm sorry, said Marco, words insufficient to express what he truly felt. Me too, Helena replied, extending her hand across the table. Marco took it, feeling the familiar softness of her skin against his. Dinner arrived, interrupting the moment. They ate in comfortable silence, occasionally sharing observations about the food or light memories from the past. It was almost as if they were relearning how to be in each other's presence, rediscovering the rhythm of their shared dance. What do you think will happen tomorrow? Helena asked as they finished their meal and waited for breakfast. Marco shook his head, uncertain. I don't know. Part of me is still trying to find a rational explanation for all this. Maybe the stroller was donated without my knowledge. Maybe Luca heard about Theo from someone or saw pictures. But he knew about the Park of Stars, Helena reminded him gently. About Rex, about the songs I sing while I work. Things that no one but us could know. I know, Marco sighed. That's why the other part of me desperately wants to believe that, somehow, Theo is trying to communicate with us through this boy, that he's okay wherever he is and wants us to know it. Helena smiled, a smile that was both sad and hopeful at the same time. This is what I choose to believe, he said simply. The coffee arrived, and they drank it slowly, prolonging the moment. Neither of them wanted the night to end, as if they feared that the fragile magic that had formed between them might shatter with the light of the next day. Can I pick you up tomorrow? Marco asked as they finally left the restaurant and walked to the elevator. So we can go to the laundromat together. Yes, I would like that, Helena replied, at 2:30. I'll be here. They stopped in front of the elevator. After a moment of hesitation, Helena leaned in and gently kissed Marco's cheek. Good evening, Marco. Good evening, Helena. He watched the elevator doors close, taking her away. In the car, his fingers absent-mindedly caressed the small red toy car that now rested in his jacket pocket. Somehow that little object had become a talisman, a bridge between the past and the present, between the lost and the possibly found. Marco slept that night without the help of the pills that had been part of his routine for so long. And for the first time in years, he dreamed of Theo. Not distressing nightmares about the accident, but gentle dreams where his son ran and laughed in a sunny field, waving to him from afar as if saying, I'm okay, Dad. I'm okay. Upon waking the following morning, Marco felt something different, a lightness, an absence of the constant weight he carried in his chest. It wasn't happiness, not yet, but perhaps the first step towards it. He got up earlier than usual, had a proper breakfast instead of his usual hurried cup of coffee, and even took a short walk in the park near his apartment. The day was clear, the sky a deep blue that seemed to promise good things. In the office, his employees noticed the difference. The usually taciturn and reclusive boss now smiled politely, asked personal questions, and showed genuine interest. Aaron, who had stopped by for a quick meeting, observed the change with curiosity. Did something happen, she asked when they were alone in Marco's room. You seem different. Marco hesitated, uncertain about how much to reveal. I met Helena yesterday, he finally replied. We went to the laundromat together, met Anna and Luca, and then we checked the box in the storage room. The stroller really wasn't there. Aaron nodded thoughtfully. And what do you think that means? Marco shrugged, a small smile on his lips. Honestly, I have no idea. But for the first time in a long time, I'm feeling something other than pain and emptiness. Curiosity, hope, perhaps. He paused. Helena and I are going back to the laundry room this afternoon to see what else we can find out. A glint of concern crossed Aaron's eyes. Just be careful, Marco. You're both emotionally vulnerable. I don't want you to get hurt anymore. I know, Marco assured him. We're being cautious. But this seems important, Aaron, like it's something we need to do. Aaron nodded, squeezing his friend's shoulder in a supportive gesture. I'll be here if you need me. For anything. The rest of the morning passed in a mix of productive meetings and moments of distraction. when Marco's mind kept returning to the events of the previous day and the possibilities of what might happen in the afternoon. At 2 o'clock, he left the office, informing his secretary that he would not be returning that day. He drove to Helena's hotel, his heart pounding with a strange combination of anxiety and anticipation. She was already waiting for him at the entrance, wearing a simple light blue dress that accentuated her eyes and hair. Marco found himself observing her for a moment longer than necessary, noticing how she was still beautifully familiar and at the same time new and different. "You look beautiful," he said, as Helena got into the car. She smiled, a slight blush tinging her cheeks. "Thank you. You don't look too bad yourself." A comfortable silence settled between them as Marco drove toward the laundromat. It was as if the previous night had broken down a barrier, allowing them to communicate again not only with words, but also with the small gestures and glances that had once been their special language. The Estrella laundry was open, with a few customers coming and going with bags of laundry. Through the window, Marco could see Anna working efficiently and focused on one of the washing machines. "I'm nervous," Helena admitted as Marco parked across the street. "Me too," he agreed, offering his hand. She took it, squeezing it lightly. Together they crossed the street and entered the laundromat. The bell above the door announced their arrival, making Anna look up. Seeing them, she smiled, a gentle smile, though a little cautious. "You came," she said, drying her hands on a small apron she was wearing. "Luca is upstairs. He just got back from school." They followed her up the narrow staircase to the apartment, where Luca was sitting at the kitchen table sketching something in a notebook with colored markers. Upon seeing them, his eyes lit up with recognition and joy. "You're back. The boy in the photo said you would come back." Helena approached him, curious about the drawing. "What are you drawing, Luca?" The boy turned the notebook over so she could see. It was a child's drawing, but surprisingly detailed, of a park with a dome-shaped planetarium, tall trees all around, and 3 figures holding hands, a larger one, clearly representing a man, a medium-sized one, a woman, and a small one, a boy. "It's the Park of the Stars," Luca explained. "The boy in the photo showed it to me in my dreams. He said it was your 3 favorite place." Helena covered her mouth with her hand, staring at Marco with wide eyes. The drawing was unmistakably the municipal planetarium, with its characteristic blue dome and the eucalyptus grove that surrounded it. The place where they used to take Theo on Sundays, which he had affectionately nicknamed the Park of Stars. "Can I see?" Marco asked, reaching out to the drawing. Luca handed him the notebook, watching his reaction intently. Marco studied the drawing, noticing details that would have been impossible for Luca to know: the small ice cream kiosk to the right of the entrance, the specific wooden bench where they always sat, even the exact color of the flowers that bordered the main path. "That's exactly right," he murmured, feeling a lump in his throat. "He really likes this place," Luca commented, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. "He said it's where he learned about the constellations. And that one day, you promised to take him to see the real stars." The boy paused, frowning slightly as if trying to remember. "Something specific?" "Oh, and he wanted me to tell you that he still wants you to keep that promise." Marco and Helena exchanged a confused look. "What do you mean, Luca?" Helena asked gently. The boy shrugged. "I don't know exactly. That's all he said, that he wants you to see the stars for real like you promised." He smiled. "Maybe you could take me along. I've never been to a real planetarium." Anna, who had been watching the scene from the kitchen doorway, intervened at that moment. "Luca, that's very presumptuous. You and Mrs. Lyman don't need to—" "We'd love to," Marco interrupted, surprising himself with the spontaneity of the offer. "I mean, if your mother allows it, of course." Helena nodded enthusiastically. "Yes, it would be wonderful to take you to the planetarium." Luca clapped his hands excitedly. "Can we go now? Please, Mom, please." Anna seemed hesitant, looking from Marco and Helena to her son. "I don't know. You've already done so much coming all this way." "Please," Helena insisted, her voice soft. "It would mean a lot to us." Something in the sincerity of those words seemed to convince Anna. She nodded slowly. "That's fine, but I'll need to close the laundromat. We'll wait, Marco assured. While Anna went downstairs to organize the laundry before closing it, Marco, Helena, and Luca remained in the kitchen. The boy showed them some more of his drawings, colorful landscapes, fantastic animals, and, surprisingly, more scenes that seemed to be drawn directly from Marco and Helena's memories with Theo. "This is the furry dog," Luca explained, showing a drawing of a golden retriever lying in front of a fireplace. "The boy in the photo said he was there before he was born, but now they're friends." Helena swallowed hard, holding Marco's hand under the table. "And what is this place like where the boy in the photo is now, Luca?" she asked carefully. The boy seemed to ponder the question, his head tilted slightly to the side. "It's beautiful," he finally replied. "There's a lot of light, and people aren't sad there. He said he likes it, but that he misses you." Luca smiled. "But he also said he can see you whenever he wants, even if you can't see him." Marco felt a shiver run down his spine, not of fear, but of a strange feeling of comfort. "And does he see what we do all the time?" she asked. "Not all the time," Luca replied with the practical logic of children. "Sometimes he's busy learning new things, but he always knows when you're very sad or very happy. It's like a—" What did he say? "Oh yes, a special connection." Anna returned at that moment, no longer wearing her laundry apron. "We're ready to go," he announced. "Luca, grab your coat. It's getting chilly outside." The boy obeyed promptly, running to his room. Anna took the opportunity to speak to Marco and Helena. "I hope this is helping you all," he said quietly. "Luca seems really connected to whatever this is." "It's helping," Helena assured her, "more than you can imagine." Marco nodded in agreement. "Thank you for allowing this. I know it must be strange for you too." Anna gave a small smile. "I've learned to accept that there are things we can't explain, especially when it comes to Luca." The journey to the planetarium was enlivened by Luca's enthusiastic conversation as he asked questions about stars, planets, and galaxies. Marco answered patiently, surprised by how much he remembered of the information he had studied to share with Theo during their visits to the Star Park. Helena watched the interaction between the two with a melancholic smile. From time to time, her eyes met Marco's in the rearview mirror, conveying a complex mix of emotions, longing, pain, but also a new understanding, perhaps even forgiveness. The municipal planetarium remained virtually unchanged since the last time they had been there. The same blue dome, the same eucalyptus grove, the same ice cream kiosk to the right of the entrance. It was as if time had stood still in that small corner of the world, preserving intact the memories it held. "It's exactly like in the drawing," exclaimed Luca, jumping out of the car as soon as Marco parked. "Look, Mom, it's exactly the same." Anna looked at her son with an expression that mixed admiration and a hint of concern. How could he have drawn a place he had never visited before with such precision? As they walked through the park toward the planetarium, Marco and Helena automatically followed the familiar path they usually took with Theo. They passed the ice cream stand, crossed the small bridge over the artificial lake, and finally arrived at the wooden bench where they always sat before entering the dome. Luca, a few steps ahead, stopped suddenly in front of the bench. "Here," she said, turning to Marco and Helena. "You always sat here with him, didn't you, to eat ice cream before going inside to see the stars?" Helena gripped Marco's hand tightly, unable to answer. He was the one sitting on that side of the bench with Theo between them, holding his chocolate ice cream with serious concentration so it wouldn't melt on his shirt. "Yes, Luca," Marco managed to answer, his voice hoarse. "This is exactly where we used to sit." The boy smiled, pleased, and then pointed to the planetarium. "Shall we go inside? I want to see the constellations." The presentation at the planetarium was different from the one they used to see with Theo, now focused on the latest astronomical discoveries, with images captured by advanced telescopes and space probes. But the magic remained the same. The darkened dome, the stars projected like diamonds against the black velvet of the artificial sky, the narrator's calm voice telling stories about gods and heroes, transformed into constellations. Luca watched everything with wide, fascinated eyes, occasionally whispering questions to Marco, who answered with the same patience he had once shown Theo. Helena observed the two, seeing in that interaction something that had been brutally ripped from their lives, the simple joy of sharing knowledge with a curious child. When the presentation ended, and the lights gradually came on, Luca was beaming. "It was the coolest thing I've ever seen in my life," she declared, gesturing excitedly. "And the stories about the constellations, incredible. My friends at school won't even believe me when I tell them." His joy was contagious. Marco found himself smiling, a genuine smile, one that came from within, the kind of smile he hadn't given in years. "How about some ice cream before we go?" Helena suggested, pointing to the kiosk they could now see through the planetarium window. "Yes!" exclaimed Luca, already running towards the exit. Anna followed him quickly, casting an apologetic glance at Marco and Helena. "He gets a little hyperactive when he's excited," she explained. "No problem," Marco assured him. "Theo was exactly like that after the performances here, as if he had absorbed the energy of all those stars." They walked to the ice cream stand, where Luca was already carefully examining the illustrated menu. "Chocolate," she finally decided, "with sprinkles." "It's the same choice Theo always made," Helena commented quietly to Marco. He nodded, feeling that strange mixture of pain and comfort that seemed to define the whole experience. It was as if the universe was offering them a second chance, not to recover what they had lost, but perhaps to find peace with it. They sat on their usual bench, Luca between Marco and Helena, Anna next to her daughter. The boy savored his ice cream with the serious concentration, typical of children, determined not to waste a single drop. "You know," he said suddenly, looking at Marco, "the boy from the photo is here now." Helena's ice cream almost fell from her hand. "What?" she asked, her voice barely audible. "He's here," Luca repeated casually, as if commenting on the weather. "Right there, near that tree. He's smiling." Marco and Helena looked in the indicated direction, a large eucalyptus tree whose shadow danced in the gentle afternoon breeze. There was nothing visible there, at least not to the naked eye. Is he saying something?" Marco asked, his voice trembling. Luca tilted his head slightly, as if he heard something that the others couldn't hear. "He says he's happy that you fulfilled the promise of the stars, and that—" The boy frowned, concentrating, "and that now you need to fulfill the other promise." "What other promise?" Helena asked. "The promise to be happy," Luca replied simply. "He says you promised to be happy no matter what happened, and that he came to remind you of that promise." Marco felt warm tears stream down his face. He remembered that moment exactly, the three of them lying on Theo's bed one night when the boy was afraid of a storm. "Promise we'll always be happy no matter what happens?" Theo had asked, his little fingers gripping Marco and Helena's tightly. "We promise," they answered in unison, sealing a pact they never imagined would be so difficult to keep. Helena was crying now too, silently, her hand reaching for Marco's behind Luca. "Tell him we'll try," she asked Luca. "Tell him we'll do our best." The boy smiled, looking at the tree again. "He already knows," she replied, "and he's very happy about it." End of story. Dear listeners, we hope this emotional journey with Marco, Helena, Luca, and little Theo has touched your heart. For more equally captivating stories exploring the mysteries of love and human connection, we have a special playlist prepared especially for you. Just click the link on the left. If this narrative stirred emotions in you, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and like this video. Every day we bring you unique stories that reveal the complexity and beauty of life in its many dimensions. Share your feelings and reflections in the comments below. Your experience enriches our community of listeners. Until the next story,